Welcome to This Explainer. Today we're taking some raw, dense court dockets and transforming them into this wild narrative about what seems like your average, run-of-the-mill neighborhood dispute, except this one spiraled into something much, much bigger. We are looking at the case of Jason and Melissa Komorowski versus the Whisper Mountain Homeowners Association.
Seriously, what actually happens when a standard neighborhood squabble over property maintenance blows up into a multi-year legal battle? We're talking a fight that required specialized panels, remote virtual trials, and, get this, the complex hydrology of a 300-foot mountain slope. So let's dive right into this procedural maze and see exactly how a modern civil lawsuit unfolds step by step.
Okay, so here is our primary legal arena. On one side, we've got the defending party, the Whisper Mountain HOA, backed by their legal counsel. And overseeing this incredibly intense fight, the Honorable Pamela Gates and the Honorable Joseph P. Mikadish. These two judges were the ones tasked with managing all the crazy procedural maneuvers we're about to look at.
Before a trial even officially kicks off, there are some pretty complex negotiations. That brings us to Section 1, Navigating Fair Limits Proceedings, a menu of legal options.
You see, the court literally presented a menu of options to both sides to try and streamline this fight. The judge didn't just say, all right, see you at trial. No, they offered highly specific structural choices to save time and money. We're talking waiving a jury entirely, strictly capping witness examination times, or even doing a paper trial based solely on written briefs. They even threw in an option called baseball arbitration. That's where the outcome is limited to two specific numbers, and the judge just has to pick the one that's most accurate. It's kind of fascinating because it really shows how flexible civil litigation can be, if the parties are actually willing to compromise on procedure.
Now keep in mind the timing of all this. This battle was raging in August of 2020. Yeah, meaning all these intricate legal strategies and high-stakes negotiations, they were being debated entirely over video conference links. The court docket specifically mandated that participants join the hearing using the GoToMeeting platform. It's just this really stark reminder of how the entire justice system had to completely pivot to digital platforms just to keep the wheels turning.
Let's see how all this built into an even more specialized judicial mechanism. Section 2, Proposing Blue Ribbon Panels, the strategic draft.
So, instead of a traditional jury, the court proposed this highly compressed, rapid-fire timeline to draft what they called a blue ribbon panel. On September 23rd, the court hands over a list of 20 judge pro temps, which are basically temporary judges or super qualified attorneys. From there, it honestly operates almost exactly like a sports draft. 2 days later, on September 25th, each side gets to execute exactly 3 alternating strikes to knock out candidates they don't want. And then boom, by October 5th, all witness declarations are due. The whole thing is incredibly fast-paced and deeply, deeply strategic.
Ultimately, what they were doing was constructing a highly specialized 3-person panel. These folks would serve as special masters to decide on damages. But here's the catch. A binding verdict would be reached if just 2 of those 3 panelists agreed. Simple majority rules. Now think about that. That completely changes the risk calculus for both the homeowners and the HOA, right? Especially when you compare it to needing a traditional unanimous jury verdict.
But while those structural negotiations were going on, the two sides were also engaging in some heavy head-to-head combat. Section 3, Pretrial Clashes and COVID Protocols, Fighting in a Pandemic.
This part right here reveals the fierce tactical battles happening on paper. The defendant, the HOA, filed what's known as a divert motion. Now, if you aren't familiar, a divert motion is this very specific legal maneuver used to completely block or restrict the opposing side's expert witnesses from testifying. Basically, it's a huge attempt to kneecap the plaintiff's case before it even gets off the ground. So the plaintiffs responded. The defense then filed a motion to reconsider, but ultimately, as the docket shows, Judge Mikadish flat out denied the HOA's motion. Those expert opinions were definitely going to be heard.
And grounding us firmly in the reality of that era, the dockets contain these really strict boilerplate warnings. Anyone who actually dared to set foot inside the physical court building was subject to intense health screening protocols. Masks or face coverings were absolutely mandatory. And the court explicitly noted, hey, we are not providing these for you. If you refuse to wear one, you were literally denied entry to your own trial. No exceptions.
So, just to keep the wheels of justice turning under those wild conditions, everyone had to adapt. In October 2020, the parties actually stipulated to limit the jury panel to just 5 jurors. Furthermore, they explicitly agreed to allow remote appearances via video for any witnesses who were uncomfortable showing up in person due to the health crisis. And that actually included one of the plaintiffs herself, Melissa Komorowski.
All right, after all those strikes and motions, we finally reached the resolution. Section 4, the final court ruling, the climax of the docket.
The case ultimately went to a bench trial, meaning the judge alone decided the facts. This happened across 3 days in early November 2020, with the closing arguments finally wrapping up in December. So, after navigating all those Daubert motions, the potential special panels, the crazy virtual logistics, how did the judge finally rule on the actual merits of the case?
Well, the court ruled in favor of the plaintiffs, Jason and Melissa Komorowski. The judge awarded them damages in the exact amount of $17,800.01. I mean, the sheer precision of that single penny at the end, it really speaks volumes about just how meticulous the accounting of damages was during this trial.
But it wasn't just about the money. The judge also issued a permanent injunction that required the maintenance of a specific drainage ditch. At the same time, they completely denied the HOA's request to just up and build a totally new channel. And on top of that, the judge flatly denied the HOA's aggressive pretrial motions. Specifically, they shot down a Rule 50 motion for partial judgment and a Rule 37 motion where the HOA was actually seeking sanctions against the plaintiffs for allegedly hiding rental documents. Overall, a massive sweeping victory for the property owners.
Now, at this point, you might be asking yourself, wait, all of this over a ditch? That brings us to Section 5, uncovering the root cause, the true source of the conflict. It is finally time to dig into the judge's findings of fact from March 2021 and uncover what actually sparked this massive legal war. Hidden beneath all those layers of procedural legalese and go-to meeting links, we find the physical heart of the matter, Lot 52. The Komorowskis bought this property in the Whisper Mountain subdivision back in 2013. And the defining geographic feature of this specific lot is that it sits right at the base of the north slope of Whisper Mountain itself. Let's trace the actual physical path of the problem, exactly as the judge outlined it. Step 1, the top of Whisper Mountain sits a full 300 feet above this specific drainage easement. Step 2, gravity does what gravity does. Rainwater flows rapidly down that massive steep slope. And Step 3, that rushing water hits a drainage channel that was supposedly designed and plotted to intercept the flow, safely conveying it away from lots 49 through 52. Well, this quote right here really highlights the true genesis of the flooding, and frankly, the entire lawsuit. The original developer of the subdivision, VIP Construction, completely failed to build that intercepting channel according to the approved 2004 engineering plans. They missed the mark on the specific dimensions, the slopes, the materials, basically everything required to keep those properties safe from the mountain's runoff. They just didn't build it right. And that brings us to where the ultimate liability actually falls. Under Section 10.1 of the Community's Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, the CC&Rs, the Whisper Mountain HOA had a binding contractual obligation with every single homeowner. That contract clearly dictated that the HOA must maintain, repair, and replace those drainage facilities. So, because the original channel was defective from the start, and the HOA failed to adequately repair it to protect the property, the burden of liability fell squarely on the collective association's shoulders. Looking at this incredible docket, it really leaves you wondering about the hidden liabilities lurking in our own neighborhoods, doesn't it? Like, what does it truly take to enforce a community contract? When original developers cut corners and fail to build vital infrastructure the right way, who should ultimately bear that agonizing cost and legal burden? Is it the individual homeowner who just happens to be left at the base of the mountain, or is it the collective association bound by the paperwork? It is definitely a question worth asking before you sign your next set of HOA documents. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and as always, keep questioning the fine print.